All right, everybody get signed in. All right, well, welcome to week 2, Web225. We'll go over some announcements first. This week we're going over history of cameras. Your take home this week when you leave is you're going to take photos of each other, preferably out in the foyer area. It's pretty well lit. When you leave the double doors of the computer lab, there's a really nice lit area there. Then if you keep walking down the hall to the right, there's like a hangout area there. You can take photos there where it's pretty well lit. And so you kind of get to know each other's names and have fun taking photos. So be your first photo assignment of the semester. Other announcements, in week 2, I did post one more announcement, I believe, besides what we're doing for the course. If you've not heard about the RBC downtown location, it's the RR Star building. You probably are familiar with that. We have a location there now with a couple computer labs and a number of courses we're teaching. And I do an hour of code free to the public, so I thought it'd be cool to offer it down there this semester. So we're going to be doing it the first Wednesday of the month starting in February for 1 hour from 5 to 6. It's a fun hands-on learning about coding. It's drag and drop coding. It's unplugged online learning, perfect for all ages. So you can bring your brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews. You can bring your kids with you if you want to. Everyone's welcome. The age range we've had over the last year has literally been 5 to like 86. So it's a lot of fun, just 1 hour. I do a raffle prize at the end of each session. So I think I usually give away a selfie stick and a mobile charger every time. So it's not a lot, but it's something. And you get a certificate of completion when you're done. There's something like 500 million people have taken the Hour of Code Challenge in the world. And so you'd be one of those to complete that. President Barack Obama has taken it, Michelle, the 2 girls, and the list goes down. Code.org is what originated Hour of Code. It was a math high school teacher that wanted to get computer science in K through 12 and just challenge everybody to try code for an hour. So anyway, RSVP link is there. And then learning coding with robots. I'm getting these in tomorrow, actually, 20 of them. And I'll show a little video to show you what it is. Turn up the sound. I got a few slots left still for that one. It's kind of fun. Let's see how loud this is. Switch the power here. Sorry about that. Okay, everybody's deaf now. Wow, that was loud. Woo! Sorry out there. Ooh, man. Majorly, like it's possessed or something. Ooh. This little Ozo bot we'll be using. Take one of those home with you when you're done. can run on code that you create or lines on paper, either one. So it's a cool little robot that teaches coding, and you get to take a cool robot home. It was actually got a lot of awards last year, and it's $85 normally for the entire class, but for students it's $20 off, so it's $65. And I'm getting them in tomorrow. So when I get them in, I'll probably bring them in here, take a picture of them, show them everybody. But we had one in December, and it was sold out. So I'm about quarter way through right now, filling the seats. So if you're interested, or if you want to sponsor, or your family wants to sponsor some folks, some young people to attend, that'd be great. And so learning coding with robots, it is going to be in this building on Saturday, January 28th from 10 to noon. And you get a binder, the robot, and it's for children and adults, just like Hour of Code. Okay, questions on that? On either one, RBC Hour of Code or Learn Coding with Robots? The other thing you might, yeah, go ahead.
Pay for myself, I have to pay for the kids.
If you want to just, I had parents go with their child, and just, you can both do it together, or have granddad do it with grandson, or so no, you don't have to buy 2 tickets. Good question. So if you just want to kind of go together and hang out, you can definitely do that. Yeah, good. You got 2 kids, yeah. However you want to do it. I mean, I've had families buy one for the 2 or 3 kids, but if you don't want to fight over, probably good to get 2. But one is that you're not limited. You know, I'm not going to say if you have 3 people in there, you have to pay for 3 tickets. So it's whatever you want to do. Yeah, it's up to you. Good question, because I do have a lot of parents come with their kids, but they don't want to buy a robot. They just want to kind of hang out with the kid. Yeah. The RBC Hour of Code is February 1st downtown. This one is January 28th in this building on Saturday. Yeah, the Learn Coding robots. And then I just got off the phone today with Barnes & Noble. They have what's called a Maker Fair every year, and I've been asked to lead that. It's going to be the end of March, and I'll tell you more about that later. I might ask some of you if you want to help volunteer for that. It'll be from 6 to 9 on a Thursday night. It's on March 30th. It's during District 205's spring break, and so be a good opportunity to play with one of these. And I have a couple other robots I'll be bringing. One of them will be Dester, that's like FaceTime on a Segway. And then the other is a tabletop robot that you can remote into and control the robot's movement. So anyway, if you're into robots, I got a lot of stuff for you. If you're into coding or you want to think about coding, a lot of stuff for you too this semester. Oh, and you can also sign up for all 4 Hour of Codes. Each one of them will be different. The one in February is Flappy Bird game, I believe. The one in March is Minecraft. April is Frozen, the movie Frozen. It's on the app based on that. And then May, I'm doing one on Star Wars. Yeah, Star Wars trilogy. And so anyway, it's a lot of fun. So questions on any announcements yet? All right, let's go ahead and go to the week 2 camera history. Some folks had issues with Foki. If anybody have any issues signing up to Foki? Okay, if you did, see me right after class, and I'll help you get signed up. So come see me. We'll get you fixed up. Okay, so hopefully last week I saw a few of your submissions Sunday on your inspiration photos. Look pretty cool. And your camera is kind of a wide range. Hopefully you brought yours tonight. If you didn't bring yours tonight and you forgot, make sure and bring it starting next week. The lab you'll be taking home tonight, you can pretty much take with any camera phone if you didn't bring your camera. And if you're using your camera phone for the class, that's fine as well. So I don't want you to go out and purchase a point and shoot camera whatsoever. And we'll talk about tonight a little bit about, when we talk about the history, the different types of cameras that are out there. So we'll go over some notes here in a second. The podcast, what you're seeing and hearing is being recorded, and I'll show you where that's at in just a second. Then we'll go into right after the notes section and discussion. The in-class exercise will start in here, but then you'll take it with you as you leave. And every week you will have a take-home. We normally start in here about how it works. This week, just so happens week 2, just get to know each other. And normally most of your take-homes start in here with description of what your photo assignment's going to be. And then you get to start. You can either start taking some here on campus, but being nighttime here, it's kind of hard sometimes. And so more than likely you'll have to do it the next day or day after. Here's the podcast, what we're recording right now. Notes we'll go over in just a second. And your take home. What you're going to do is after the discussion, you'll take photos of classmates is the title of it. You'll practice at least 10 photos per person in your group. So we'll say you leave with 2 or 3 people. Well, I recommend at least 2 or 3. Don't leave by yourself tonight. So I want to kind of get you to know each other's first name, you know, a little bit about yourself maybe. Have some fun with it. You'll set your camera to auto mode, which we'll talk about in just a second how to do that. And every week, by the way, before I send you out, we go over the settings. This week you're just going to use auto mode, but each week you're going to be learning more about the different settings, and I'll kind of walk around and make sure you know where auto mode is on the camera or smartphone that you have. Most auto modes have you press the button halfway down if you have a point and shoot in order to focus. If you're using a smartphone, even some of them do now as well. They have the pressure sensitive 3D touch on the iPhone. Same with Droids, have the same deal. When you're in focus, you take a photo. And here's what I suggest doing so you'll remember each other's names after you do this out in the foyer or wherever, is text yourself that picture that you just took. Once they choose the one that they like, that person, text yourself that picture and put their name in the text message. Okay, so you'll kind of know, because when you submit these, I want their first name submitted in the title of the photo. So you'll have the classmates choose which one they like on your phone or on your camera. You'll name it, really, and this is just for management's sake at home. When you download it to your computer or your laptop at home, is just for namesake to use their last name. One of the things I want you to do when you're posting a photo on Foki, when you label the photo, which we'll show you how to do in Foki tonight before you leave, is I'm just trying to put their first name, because these are public, so I don't want people's full name on there. So we'll just have you put their first name. Will be great. You'll create a folder in Foki called Week 1, and you'll upload the 3 or 4 photos or 2 or 3 photos, however many you have in your group. All right. All you'll do in this message here, since you already submitted your Foki link, is you'll just submit done when you're finished, and I'll look at your Foki website, your URL, and find that folder and click on it. So if you go back one on your web browser, if you're where I'm at, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you're right. You're correct on that. We'll leave it at week 1 since I already have it in there. Because when I first made this assignment, like years ago, it wasn't week 1, but a lot of students didn't bring their camera. So I moved it to week 2. So we'll just leave it week 1. That's fine. Thank you, though, for mentioning that. Because I do have a week 1 here, but then I said when done, upload to week 2 album. We'll just know it's week 1. So thank you. All right, so if we go back here to the notes, I'm going to go and click on these notes, and you can watch on the overhead, or you can view them with me. It's a lot of, not a lot of text and images on here, more images and text. So even though it says 58 slides, it will go pretty fast here. All right, so let me go to full screen here. In fact, let me download this so it'll be a better view for me. There we go, that's better. Okay, so we're going to look at an overview of digital camera technologies. We're going to look at some basic photographic techniques. So, the technology. We have different terminologies in digital photography: DSLR, megapixels, image stabilization, dust reduction, live view, sensors, facial recognition. You probably heard of some of these or all of these. What do they all mean? I'm glad you asked. It really doesn't matter. Maybe to some of you, you're like, don't really care. That's fine. Some of these I don't care about really. And so a lot of these new ones on the block would be like facial recognition. That will be in the last few years. Facial recognition has. Image stabilization in the last 5 to 8 years. So 3 main classes of cameras, digital cameras, and point and shoot, prosumer, and digital SLR. We will throw the smartphones because they're really, some of them pretty high end as far as the quality of photos they take now. I actually classify them really in the point and shoot region, and even maybe some prosumer, depending on the camera you have. You can have some really high quality images from a lot of your phones today, whereas 8, 10 years ago it didn't even exist, and so now it's like a no-brainer. So point and shoot cameras are usually preferred to or referred to in the market as consumer cameras. They're about 90% saturation in the market, people that have bought them from home users. Typically they're small like this, compact, lightweight. They target a broad audience, typically very user-friendly. Image quality has improved drastically over time with these point and shoots. And prosumer is basically like this Sony here. It's the next step up. It's kind of the entry-level DSLR, which we'll talk about in a second. Similar shape and size to point and shoot, a little extended zoom maybe, and more advanced features. Digital SLR, it stands for single lens reflex. They have a larger lens and a lot of times detachable lenses that can be pretty expensive. A friend of mine is a professional photographer that actually was a photographer for Ronald Reagan years ago. Has, some of these lenses are like $5,000 just like one lens. And so, but this is all he does all day long. For his whole life, it's all he's done. And so it's his livelihood. So, you've seen these on the sidelines on football games, baseball games, any event, the real large zoom type cameras that can really get close in to shots, down the football field. Tend to favor manual control. They lack automatic type of stuff found in point and shoot, but they kind of brought some of that in to these SLRs today. And they're much larger, much heavier, and interchangeable lenses, as I mentioned. So what's the real difference between digital SLR and point and shoot? Again, glad you asked. Basically, image quality is the difference, big difference. Like you can have we'll learn about some of these terminologies, like 6 megapixel DSLR could have a better picture image than a 10 megapixel point and shoot or 24 megapixel a smartphone or whatever. And the reason for it is the size matters when it comes to the digital sensor. The digital sensor in a DSLR that's hidden behind the scenes when you take a photo, you have an image, regardless of what the image here, it's a deer here with a zoomed in on the ear there on the left side and it's blown up on the right side. Millions of tiny little squares known as pixels. So if you take a photo program and blow up a photo, you could see these images, see these pixels as they become closer and closer. Essentially, these images are recorded in what's called tiny micro lenses or pixels, which makes up the sensor, made up by the sensor. So all pixels are not created equal. A digital sensor is essentially made up of millions of tiny micro lenses within the camera. Pixels are analog devices which record light and color data. Larger sensors contain larger pixels, which are much better at collecting data. So on the top, you have a normal point and shoot. The bottom would be the SLR range. So you'll notice the colors are much larger and the patches of colors are bigger to give a better quality of image. And so most people today, though, when they take photos, most users today, when they take photos, are using photos for the web. And so they're either on the website, a blog, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And so the highest quality image you need actually on a web image is like 72 dots per inch. That's about it. That's all you really need. Some of these images you see in magazines and in newspaper and in video might get into the, millions of dots per inch, basically, because of the high quality of the image. So for most people, the prosumer or the point and shoot digital camera or the smartphone is plenty for what most folks use their cameras for today. But just to see some differences here, when I first started out learning with my mom years ago as a young kid, when I had my old Brownie camera, mom had a 35 millimeter film camera. And this slide's here about a few years old, but it's still yet, even believe it or not, we've still not reached the quality of the original film 35 millimeter camera as far as what you can do with it post-production once an image is taken out of a camera or once a film's taken out of a camera. We're getting there, but not quite there as yet. And so here's an example of like a 35 millimeter normal lens, normal camera. Will give you the full frame of a scene that you're taking a photo of. The middle shot is what you normally get on a point and shoot or a nice camera phone that you have today. So the technologies included some of the definitions here. Megapixels, they determine the total size of the image recorded to the camera, which is computated and created by the image sensor, the digital sensor. More megapixels does not always mean a better picture because the digital image dimension does not always equal print dimensions. For example, a full quality image from an 8 megapixel camera will produce a digital image measuring approximately 9:14. Printing standards say that you should not print photo quality any larger than 8:10. And that's 8 megapixels. Most of your cameras today are running in the 20 megapixels, 40 megapixel range. So we have an example here of the line going this way is the size of photo that can be taken, or on the left side would be the megapixels. Over here is going to be the size of print. So we can do 18 megapixels, can go all the way up to 44 inches on print. Would be like poster size type of photo. Movement compensation. It refers to the camera's ability to correct small movement when you're taking a photo. So if you're not using a tripod, your hands will move a little bit. And even if the person doesn't or the object you're taking a photo of it doesn't. And so cameras now have a way to compensate for that, to cause less blur when the camera shakes or the object shakes, either one. It's very useful in low light and telephoto situations. Different terminologies for movement compensation by different companies. Nikon is vibration reduction. VR, Canon is image stabilization, IS. Pentax is shake reduction, SR. And Sony, super steady shot. And these are all proprietary trademarked names, but they do the same thing, all of them. And depending on how they integrate it in the camera, but they're all the same technology. Dust reduction. Now, this only really falls into the area of the high-end DSLR cameras. And when I say high-end, years ago, high-end was thousands of dollars. Now, high-end DSLR starts out at $350, $300, roughly around there. So much more reasonable than what it used to be. But dust in DSLRs, the reason it's there is because of the removable lenses. When you remove a lens, you could get dust inside of the camera. And so because of that, it's real difficult to remove Dust reduction shakes the camera's sensor to free it of any clinging dust particles. So the actual digital sensor has a little motor in there that will actually shake it and vibrate it to shake off any dust. It also has special anti-static coatings or filters that can be used as well. You've used this maybe in some of your cameras, a live view, where you're taking a photo and you can see in a live view LCD the view of what you just took after the photo was taken or even prior to the photo being taken. So if you're in a concert, you can hold it up and see from the LCD viewer what it is you're getting ready to take. Shots can be composed even while holding the camera away from your face, originally on point and shoots only, but now DSLRs also have live view in them. I mean, now you can even go further than that with, remote cameras now, where you can put a remote camera somewhere and zoom in from a watch or from a smartphone and take a photo now that way. So facial recognition. This is fairly embedded in most all cameras now. Even your smartphones will have this. It detects your face and frames it based on color contrast, and actually everybody's face, regardless of skin color, everybody's face has certain bone structures that your camera can recognize and pinpoint the eye socket, nose socket, mouth, and tell it's a face. Focuses automatically. A lot of your cameras will actually put like a little green box around all your faces before it takes a photo. And it might not even let you take a photo until all the boxes are steady and not moving anymore. Especially if you have it like on a portrait type of setting or something. Color and contrast are automatically adjusted to create tones, skin tones, because facial recognition helps with that. So getting a good shot, that's probably one of the reasons, besides graduate requirement, is you might want to learn how to take a good shot this semester. How are you going to do that? And hopefully by the end of the semester, you will have satisfied that craving and that desire to do that. Because regardless of what the camera is that you have, you can learn how to take a better photo for sure. I can teach you that. And there's hundreds of different factors involved, from the settings of your camera, the lighting, position, whole bunch of, hundreds and hundreds of different types of factors. And it's kind of a relative term. It's part art, part science when it comes to taking photos. And I would say more art really than science, even though there's a lot of technology. You can take a really good photo if you know lighting, positioning, and placement of objects in your photo. You can really take a good photo. And that's kind of what you'll learn this semester, besides your settings of your camera, what a good photo is, how it's structured, the lighting, all of that. Exposure, and we'll talk about what all that is this semester. So for our purposes, though, we'll say have a good sense of correct exposure. Like in this room here, terrible exposure with fluorescent lighting. Not a real good room to take nice photos. If you've ever been in a photo booth for professional photos, inside they always have a lot of lighting, a lot of saturation of light, no shadows. So lighting is good, okay? And you could say lighting is exposure, okay? And you've seen that probably on your camera, regardless of what the camera is you have, playing with exposure and what that's all about. And exposure, anytime you hear that, has to do somewhat with the lighting that you're around. So correct or good exposure occurs when you maintain as much detail as possible between the bright parts, or what's called highlights, or the very dark parts are called shadows of an image. So if you've been into Photoshop or any imaging software, you might have seen these terms, highlights, or you've seen shadows when it comes to your photos you've looked at. And we'll get into this semester a thing called histograms, to where you'll learn how to read a histogram on your camera, regardless of what camera you have, they all have them, and figure out by the histogram if it's going to be a good photo or not, by just looking at the histogram before you take it. And so How much of a range you have when you capture detail from light to dark is referred to what's called dynamic range. As you're about to see, there's many correct or good exposures. 3 factors, though, kind of like a 3-legged stool that's used for a lot of things in life. So you've got, in this 3-legged stool, to get a good photo, you've got shutter speed, correct shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, those 3. So shutter speed, this refers to how long the opening is of the camera's shutter, how long it stays open. And not only how long it stays open, we're going to learn about also the proximity of the hole in that camera when it stays open, that shutter speed. But just for now, the shutter speed in and of itself. Is it fast? Is it slow? And as you can imagine, if a shutter speed is left open, even in this room, for a long enough period of time, it's going to be better exposure just because you're letting more light in. Just kind of when you and I walk into a dark room, like that room over there that's dark right now, if we were to walk into there, how long would it take for our eyes to adjust to that room, to get around and walk around in there with no light? Milliseconds, right? Our eyes would adjust, right? Our eyes do that, by the way. They adjust automatically. We know that. We just take it for granted. The camera doesn't do that. And so we have to sometimes tell the camera some things. And one of those ways we can tell the camera to bring in more light is shutter speed. And how long the camera sees the picture or sees the scene, or I like to use the term bring in the light, how long it brings in the light, or what less of time it brings in the light. It's measured in seconds from 300 to 188 thousandths of a second. So here's an example of a fast shutter speed, 600 or up, used in stop motion, will freeze a subject. We've all seen these, right? You might have taken some yourself. So when a person jumps up in the air, fast shutter speed, literally stops everything. There's no blurring. It just freeze motion, right? There's a lot of cool videos you see today where they take freeze motion, splice it together to make it look like a person's like on a skateboard flying in the air or something. You know, you might have seen something like that. So fast shutter speed, freeze motion. Slower shutter speeds actually add movement to the scene, as these both scenes on the left side, even though it's just a linear, 2-dimensional picture, water looks like it's moving, even though it's not, just because of the shutter speed being slowed down. Same thing with the runners. We see the movement of their legs, their arms, some of their heads, depending on if they're moving those, and the background's totally blurred. Okay, and again, slower shutter speed will give us a movement, a field movement. And here's a very slow shutter speed, 5 seconds or slower, can be used in a very low light situation, like over an overpass here. And notice how all the lines of the cars over a period of time can look like one line. All the headlights merged together, which looks kind of cool. I saw a picture on 3951 of a photographer that put his camera, Nels Ackerman, who I was talking about earlier, put his camera on one of those wind farms for, I think he said, like 10 hours, a wind farm. It was a 10-hour time-lapse photo. And when he showed it to me, it looked like basically, you see those big lollipops with the rings in it. It's kind of what it ended up looking like. It was the middle of a day, like early morning to like noon, something like that, 1 o'clock. I can't remember where he started at. But slower speeds does some cool effects. And sometimes you might want that with your photos. So shutter speed decreases. As shutter speed decreases, your chance of getting a blurry image increases. So it's important to keep your camera steady. So the slower the shutter speed is always a good idea to use a tripod or lean against a tree or on a knee or something like that, car hood, something like that to keep your camera steady. Because regardless of how much caffeine you've had that day, it might affect the shake of your hands. Some people, steady hands regardless all the time. Mine are pretty good. My wife's hands shake pretty good. They shake, she's naturally always been that way. And so for some of you, it might be a good idea as you're shopping around. It's not required right now, but if you see a good cheap tripod or something to take your photos with, probably a good idea to pick it up. when I say cheap or inexpensive, around the $20, $25 range is usually what I recommend. And again, you don't have to buy it right now. Aperture, it's defined as a hole in the opening. So we have the shutter speed on the speed. The aperture controls the size of that hole in the shutter, okay? And aperture number is a little different than what you would think. The lower the aperture, the higher the bigger the hole. The smaller the aperture, the larger. So it's kind of reverse logic when it comes to the number. So inside the camera lens, there's a set of blades which open and close to increase and decrease the opening, which with the light passes into the camera. And that's controlled by the aperture. It's often referred to as what's called an f-stop. And it's usually represented by these like f1.8, 5.6. Now 1.8 will be a larger hole than 5.6. It'd be smaller. 5.6 would. So the smaller number means a wider opening, referred to as a larger value or a larger aperture of like say 2.0, small aperture 22. The wider the lens is open, the larger aperture value, the more light gets in, and you can take faster shutter speeds. And so here's an example of some of the f-stops on cameras. And it's a dramatization of this, but you can get the gist of it. So F2, pretty wide open. F4, shutting a little bit more. F8, a little bit more, and F16, a little bit more. Okay? So as you can imagine, the smaller the hole, the less light's getting in, right? So, by the way, some of your cameras will have what's called an aperture mode. If you're in aperture mode, it'll adjust shutter speed for you. If you have a shutter mode, it'll adjust aperture for you automatically. So it does both in tandem. So depth of field, this is where aperture controls. You see pictures to where the subject's in focus, but the background is blurred a little bit, which we kind of like when we're taking like portraits or individual photos against a backdrop. You've seen it where it's naturally blurred. That is the depth of field, and it refers to basically the image itself, the subject, whatever it might be, a person, an object, being clear focus, and then everything else kind of blurred just a little bit. So it kind of makes that image, what we call in graphics design, it kind of makes that image pop out, makes it just pop out of the image. So what happens in this is a wide aperture, small f-stop, small aperture number, will give you a shallow depth of field, and you can use to isolate that subject in that depth of field. So here's an example: 3 balls of twine. On the left, shallow depth of field. You'll notice beyond the first ball of twine, it's blurred, right? And that's a shallow depth of field of an f-stop 2.8 aperture. Wide depth of field, f-stop 32, which gives no depth whatsoever. There's no, it's all linear, basically. Nothing really pops out at all. On that left one, it definitely makes a difference, right? And you've seen this in pictures before, and that's what's the trick is getting the correct aperture to do that. And then lastly, ISO. Shutter, aperture, now ISO, the third leg. It refers to the sensitivity of the sensor in your camera, okay? High ISO, the value means that the sensor will be more light sensitive. And here's the trick about ISO, real quick definition to make you understand it. ISO pretty much fakes out whatever light's in the room or outside. It manipulates it, okay? That's the job of ISO. So in this room, if I wanted to bump up the light, even though it's terrible in here, to make it a little better, I'd get a higher ISO number, like a 400, 500 number, something like that. The problem with a higher ISO, though, is it gets granular and pixelated, your image does, because there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can do with light that you have in the room. And so, but you might have seen this terminology on your cameras, or some of your cameras might actually have these settings called high ISO, low ISO. But basically, adjusting the sensor, manipulating the sensor to be more sensitive or less sensitive to light to get the right exposure. It's similar to speeds, called film speeds in 35 millimeter days. You had certain 35 millimeter speeds you could buy. The faster the speed film, the higher sports type of photography you could use, or fast type of images, moving. But it's a lot more expensive on the speed. And it would literally, the film would go faster as you took the picture, which would make less blur and things of that nature. So typically ISO, and some of your cameras will go, typically it's 100 to 1600. But as you can see, some of yours might go into 64,000 or something, some crazy number. High ISO usually causes the sensor to produce a much more heat, or I called earlier pixelated. You might have heard of that term, or noise. It literally looks like there's like, you ever seen those glass tops? I used to be a chef, still like to cook a lot. But these glass tops you get in the kitchen that have a real kind of a texture that kind of bumpy and rough a little bit. It's kind of like taking an image and putting it on one of those behind one of those glass tops and seeing the image through that. It kind of like granulates it a little bit. And so when you're using a high ISO. Noise is similar to film grain. It causes a fine detail, loss of fine detail. It's more visible in dark parts of an image and generally more noticeable when displayed on the screen, or like your monitor or LCD. Have anybody taken a picture before and it looked great on your monitor and it looked terrible when you print it out? You read that happen before? Because your photo or your computer, your software you're using, whatever it might be, can sometimes adjust it for you automatically, right? And it looks better on the monitor or LCD than it would on print. The reason most people don't know about it today is, when's the last time you printed any types of photos, right? I mean, we just had family photos done. I showed you them last week. We are going to be printing quite a bit. And I've gotten over the last couple of years, a couple small printers I use now to print like 4x6s and stuff like that. And I have a cork board at home to where we have a gathering or an event or whatever. I have these cork boards that have these little clips on it. And I just put these 4x6s on it and people can grab whatever they want to. But I'm like you, most of the photos I take, majority of my photos I take go online. They go, on some photo site or some shared site for my family to see. And so noise, though, is a big part of ISO, especially if you have a higher ISO, a higher number, because there's only so much you can do with light. So some cameras have what's called digital image stabilization. What this means is it'll automatically increase the ISO in order to allow a faster shutter speed. A faster shutter speed will reduce the likelihood of camera shake, but high ISO will also have a likelihood of granularization and pixelization of an image. The fourth element, which wasn't in there, but it's white balance. White balance is really powerful. And white balance doesn't really affect your exposure. It just affects the colors. Like an example, this white board, right? In order to know true blue in anything we do, whether print or photos, we have to know true white, what true white is in that photo. And so white balance helps us either find the true white or fake out the true white, okay? Meaning you can use different types of white balance, whether it be manual or auto white balance, to artistically apply things to photos, to make them look a blue tint, a green tint, make you look tan when you're not tan, whatever, make change color of eyes, make a photo look old, whole bunch of cool stuff you can do with white balance. But different light sources give different colors, even though your eye doesn't see it. In here with fluorescent, it's going to give kind of a bluish tint or a yellowish tint, depending on the bulb. And some of your cameras will have on your white balances, one of the options is white balance fluorescent, white balance halogen, white balance LED. And so depending on your light, white balance is important to have what kind of light you have, what source it is. Like an example with incandescent, which are legal to buy anymore. But there's still places, I still have some actually stocked up that I use. And the lighting of an old incandescent bulb, it's much different than the lighting of a fluorescent bulb, right? You've probably seen that in your house. Takes a little bit to get bright, and then it's just a little different hue to the surrounding. So white balance is essentially the camera compensating for the color cast, whatever it might be, and correcting those colors. So the color cast of light is referred to color temperature, and it's on what's called a Kelvin scale in degrees, ranging from cool to warm. Most digital cameras have automatic white balance by default set, but you can also go in and you'll learn that this semester how to manually adjust white balance as well with what's called a white card or a gray card. You literally put a white card in a picture, focus on that white card to find out the true white, and then it adjusts everything in your photo accordingly from that true white. So basic in-camera settings. We're going to look at some camera setting modes that are basic to most cameras. Exposure modes, several of them, that have a combination of automatic, manual over these three elements that we looked at. Auto, sometimes represented by the letter A or simple green square, or looks like a green camera. Fully auto functioning, true point and shoot, and pretty much all your cameras have this by default set. AV mode or aperture priority will choose the aperture value. You choose the aperture value, and the camera chooses your shutter speed for you automatically. Shutter priority or TV, you choose a shutter, it adjusts the aperture for you to correct the exposure. And then M or manual, you have complete control. You choose both the shutter speed and the aperture both manually. And I'll just stop there real quick and tell you, you'll be using some manual modes this semester. And one of the reasons you want to use manual modes at times is when your light is fluctuating a lot in a picture, which can happen outdoors more so than indoors. Clouds moving in and out over the sun, wind, things of that nature. And if you've ever tried to take a picture in automatic mode with the focus, and you've maybe seen your focus kind of go, it just never stops, right? It just keeps going. Like, okay, I can't take a photo. What's wrong? I'm doing everything. I'm not moving, and it won't let me do it because it's waiting for the right spot, and things are moving, and it's not happening. So manual mode a lot of times will help us with those situations, and you'll learn more about that this semester. Scene modes, though, are basically fully automatic for certain situations. They have typical emphasis on a certain scene or situation, and most cameras have a lot of different scene modes. So scene modes could be like backlight, eliminates dark shadows when light is coming from behind a subject, or when the subject's in the shade. It puts a full flash automatic, fires what's called fill-in flash, and some of your cameras have fill-in red eye maybe. It'll do that as well, which fill-in red eye for portrait is it takes a flash twice. One flash for your eyes to adjust, another flash for the photo to be taken. And some people, believe it or not, just have naturally more red eye than others when it comes to cameras. Anybody in your family like that, or you're like that? Okay, my daughter's like that, and so just regardless, it just happens all the time, and we have to take double photos a lot of times, or use that double flash, fill flash, red eye to help in that situation. Another one, beach snow. Photographing beach, snow, sunlit, white water scenes. It's very bright, midday, like noon, no clouds in the sky, summertime. This setting prevents the scene from becoming washed out, kind of looking like everybody's in a vampire movie. Okay, all washed out. And tripod on this one's definitely recommended because it's going to have a steady camera because of the shutter and aperture speeds it sets on this mode. Fireworks, what it sounds like for fireworks. Shutter speed and exposure set for shooting fireworks. It's a longer opening to get more light because it's dark outside and you're trying. So because of that, tripod's recommended because it's going to sit there for a few moments while it's taking the photo, letting more light in. Landscape, outside landscape, indoor landscapes. Cameras generally automatically focus things in the distance in this mode for you. Macro, this is a cool one. We'll actually do, by the way, everyone we're talking about for the most part, like landscape, we're going to be doing a week on that. Macro is another one we'll be doing a week on this semester, where you take close-up of small objects, flowers, insects. You can take a picture of a harmless fly up close and it looks like some mean creature or something. Lens can be moved closer to the subject than in other modes. You literally, in this one, your camera can be literally right up next to the subject in this type of mode. And for this one, camera steady or tripod. It's kind of hard to use a tripod on this one just because of the nature of macro. You're getting up close, and sometimes you have to stand up or get on your knees or something like that. Again, they do have specialized cameras for this and lenses for this, but all of your cameras, regardless of what you have in here, is going to do a pretty good job in macro, and it's a lot of fun. I think macros are a lot of fun to do. Night portrait. This is where you're outside at night, like when you guys leave here in a bit. Built-in flash, red eye reduction are enabled. Shutter speeds are very low. And use of tripod here are recommended. Night scene, portrait nightscapes, pre-programmed again to use slower shutter speeds to let more light in. Use of tripod recommended on this one. Party mode. This one takes in a dim lit room. We could say this room is a perfect party room right here. It's perfect, right? Because it's dim, it's not annoying to anybody's eyes. It's pretty, comfortable here, which most classrooms are as far as the light setting goes. And that's how we like it in a classroom. Your living room is much like this probably too. It's not like, wow, right in your face, lights beaming in your face. So because of that, exposure and shutter speed are adjusted automatically for the room brightness, whatever it might be. Captures the indoor background lighting or candlelight even. And then for this one, you don't really need a tripod, but just hold the camera really steady to use this mode. And these are all auto modes that we're looking at. Portraits, next one. This is where the main subject is in the photo. And it's going to do the natural blur effect in portrait mode. It's going to kind of do the natural aperture blur effect. Best when taking photos outside during the day, using mid to long photo lens for DSLR, staying up close to the subject. You're not using a lot of zooming in and zooming out in this mode. You're literally coming up as close as you can for that. Select an uncomplicated background that's not too far from the subject. And then sports mode, also known as kids and pets. Take photos of fast-moving subjects. You can do the freeze frame in this one. Best when shots are taken in pre-lit, pre-focus, recommended. And then sunset, taking pictures of sunset. And the best times, by the way, to take photos in general is sunrise and sunset outside. It's the best lighting of the day for taking really good photos. This one helps keep deep hues in the scene. And then metering mode, we'll go over that this semester. Basically what it is most of your cameras have this ability to meter certain parts of the frame you're taking a photo of. When I say frame, if you picture this is your LED on your camera and it shows you everything here. Inside of my frame I'm taking a photo of, I can pinpoint different parts of that photo scene to highlight or to zoom in on or make exposure better. And it's essentially telling the camera to evaluate every scene in a different way. And you have zoned scenes, meaning one point in the whole area. It's a dot meter, just one dot. You have multi-dot meters, like 6 or 8 of them, and it'll adjust exposure according to wherever that dot's at. Centered ones, when I talked about earlier, the single dot, goes right in the middle of the center of your photo setting that you're taking. And what it does on this one is it averages over the entire frame with emphasis placed on the center area. And this is good for general photography, portrait photography would be good for this one, centered weight. Metered modes like matrix or multi-mode is where it splits up the scene in different zones, and it evaluates each scene or each quadrant and applies different exposure to each one of those. Spot metering, this one here covers about 4% of the viewfinder area, takes a precise reading of the center of the frame and disregards the rest. Spot meters used when a subject is backlit or bright upon it, and the background is dark. For example, when there are extremes in brightness in a scene. And then partial metering, 13.5% coverage in the viewfinder. It's good for underexposed, be minimized on a face that you're taking a picture of. And partial metering is really for kind of intermediate advanced level, but we go over to the first couple weeks just so you know what it is, and you'll see it in your camera. Some of your cameras will have it, called like dot matrix. Okay, so next, composition, the rule of thirds. When I was taking my master's, in design, graphics design, we had to learn this rule of thirds in graphic design, but it even applies to photography, meaning that the frame, regardless of what you're taking a picture of, and even everything in nature, a lot of things in nature are split up into threes, okay, as far as the structure, the composite of nature. So we have your frame divided into 3 equal sections, horizontally and vertically. It divides it into thirds, and I like to call each one of the little boxes, you'll see in a second, quadrants. So you've got the concept, placing your subject or elements along any of these lines, especially near the intersecting lines, and it makes a photo more naturally attractive to the viewer. And so here's what it looks like. And most of your cameras, by the way, you might have seen this in some of your cameras, have this built in, this rule of thirds, because kind of grid, and you might have wondered what it's there for. You turned it off. It's actually a good rule. And the little X's there, the little red X's, are where the top X's are actually generally where you put the eyes of a person or persons you're taking a photo of, okay, in the top left or right area of a photo. And then the bottom left would be, like say if you're taking a scene and you have down at the bottom an ocean, and the top, in the middle of the land, and the top would be the sky. So you're naturally splitting things up. So here's the rules of thirds illustrated. So in this example here, notice the bottom portion of this, the bottom quadrant, the third quadrant, the bottom quadrant is water. You have a little sliver of land, and then you have the rest of it sky. But that middle part is actually the tree and that little island that you see there. And so it's actually split up into threes because of that. On the left side there, top left quadrant, that little cat's tail with the snail on it is right there. Top right quadrant. And so one of the things, first lesson, I guess, this week to start thinking differently in photography is when we first start doing photos, just like when we first start drawing or doing anything, we want to fill up the entire scene, right? And one of the powerful things I learned early on was white space. Give yourself white space or empty space in photography and offset things, and the rule of thirds helps you do that, if you remember that. So you'll notice all these images are offset a little bit. It's not in the center, right? Which human nature is, by default, put everything in the center, right? To center all of our stuff we take a photo of. Oh, and we got to put more stuff in there because it's not full yet, right? And want to kind of change your thinking in that, because a good photo, one of the traits of a good photo is focus of a subject in one of those upper quadrants or lower quadrants we talked about. We actually have four dots in the middle of the screen. So we got technically one here, 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 and here. This one will be on the upper quadrant that it's taking a photo of. And the reason that's a good photo is your mind fills stuff in for you. Do you know that? So when you look at a photo like this, you might be wondering, gee, what's to the right of that dot that I can't see? Or what's over there to the left of the water? I mean, your mind is thinking, it's filling in, reaching for more, and that's a good photo. That's what you want it to do. You don't want a photo to answer all the questions. You want a photo to leave people wondering and searching for more. Does that make sense? And so rule of thirds is going to help you do that. Next, rule of thirds, it's a concept, it's simple. It's not a hard, fast rule. You can break it. But basically, you just place the subject on the lines near the intersecting points. For portraits, the eyes are often positioned along one of the horizontal lines, preferably near one of the power points, which would be the upper right or left power point in the 4 power points of the rule of thirds. Naturally draws attention to the eyes. For landscape and the horizon is a line to any one of the horizontal lines, depending on the land, water, sky ratio. Generally, the rule of thumb is you want the sky to take up 2/3 and the land to take up 2/3 and the water to take up 2/3, or 1/3, I'm sorry. So 1/3 is the rule. So 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 on everything. So you can have 1/3 water, 2/3 could be land, if you want it to be. 1/3 water, 1/3 land, 1/3 sky. Okay, so it doesn't really matter where you put it, just as long as it makes sense and it kind of structurally is going to be more appealing to the eyes that way. Some last thoughts here as far as image software, imaging management. I think I mentioned this last week. Some of you might have already downloaded this maybe. Picasa, I recommend downloading that from Google, and it's free to download from Google for a Mac or PC. It's very simple to install, and it's a nice management tool. You don't really need any instructions right now except download and install it. It'll ask you, by the way, when you install it, do you want to find all your images on your computer? Say yes, because it'll do that. It'll find them all and manage them for you automatically by date and time when they were taken, location, whole bunch of cool stuff. And you just start playing around with it. So Picasa, I recommend downloading it now this week. And now we're going to take some photos. So let me switch gears here to the lab take-home. So if you get your camera out real quick, regardless what camera it is you have, point and shoot, smartphone, whatever you've got. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around real quick here just to make sure you know, I know that you know where the auto mode is on your camera. Now for some, it's pretty straightforward. For some, we might have to help you out. So kind of get your camera out, turn it on, or your app out that you're using for your phone, and we'll kind of see what's going on. And by the way, if you're using a smartphone in here, one of the apps I do recommend, and you don't have to download them for this lab, is Camera++. It's a really good app. It's not the native app that comes with your phone usually, but it's a good app you can download. I think it's available for Android and iOS both. Yep, cool. Yep, you're good. Yep, lane dot. Awesome. Yep, that's it. Yep, oh, that's it right there. Cool. Yes, that's it. Perfect. Yep, good. Yep, the green one there, good. Green one, got it. Perfect. Yes, sir. Awesome. All right, great. So here's the deal. I want you to leave with, look at each other around right now real quick while I'm walking up here. And just kind of go, oh yeah, you're going on, I'm taking your photo. Okay, now I'm sure sitting next to each other, which human nature is, I'll let you sit wherever you want to, but more than likely you'll probably sit there the rest of the semester. So those that are around your area, 2 to 3 people. You can do 4. What I want you to do is go on this foyer out here. You go up the stairs. If you keep going that way, there's another hangout area you can go to. What you're going to do is practice taking, so if you have 2 other people in your group, we'll say, you're going to take 10 photos of each person, okay? That person is going to choose a photo they like from your camera. You're going to delete all the other ones, just delete, all right? So they know you've got the one they want. Then you're going to upload that to week 1, put the first name in it. If you have, regardless of what you're taking a photo with, use your camera here for this step. Take a photo of that person. If you're using a camera already, you're doing that already, your camera phone. But text it to yourself, that picture. So if you're using a DSLR or a point and shoot, use your camera phone to take a picture of that person and text it to yourself and put that person's first name in the text. Does that make sense? So kind of remember, because if you're like me, you're going to forget as soon as you get in the car everybody's name that you just met, okay? So taking a picture of each other is going to help you remember their first name. And when you upload it to Foki, let me show you that real quick before we go here. It's not real hard. I'm going to show you how to create a folder in Foki and upload, or create a folder and create an album. So let me go ahead and log in here. Okay, so I'm going to go to my albums in Foki, and I'm going to go down here. I'm going to actually create a folder for our class. I clicked on Web225, but you guys will have public home, I believe, by default on yours. But I'm going to click on, well, I already had a folder created called Web225. Down here on the left column, there's one called Create New Folder. I'm going to title this one Web225 Spring 17, and you just have to put Web225 on yours if you want to, and then click Create. It created the folder for me. Now I've clicked on that folder. I know I've clicked on it because it says it over here. And then right now I can click this new album, and I'm just going to put in here week 1, create album, and that's it. Now when you go to upload this, since you're uploading 3 or 4 pictures and that's it, a couple ways to upload this. There is an app Foki has, I believe. I've used it. I don't really like it too much. It does work. I've never really used it much. You can actually, from your computer at home, you can move your screen here, and you can take it, like I'll do a photo of this screen just to show you what I'm talking about. I just did a screenshot. I can take this and drag it into that, and it's uploading it right now, and refresh it. And here, if I click edit, I can come in here and in place of the title, I'm going to put Web225 to show you how easy it is. Hit save, and there you go. So Web225 will be Tim, Joe, Cindy, whatever. Make sense? So that's the simplest way to do it. When you get home and you dump your photo onto your computer or laptop, just drag and drop it into that album and click edit, rename it. Sound good? Any questions? All right, so go out and have fun, find out each other's first name, take each other's photo, and when I walk out there, I'll see everybody laughing and just go, whatever. So have a good time, get to know each other, and we'll see you next week. And make sure you're with 2 or 3 people at least. I don't want to be by yourself.